In 1900, Rudolf Diesel stood before the world's most prestigious engineering audience and demonstrated his engine running on peanut oil. In 1938, over 2,000 gas stations across 8 American states were selling fuel pressed from grain. The engines ran clean. The economics worked. Farmers were energy independent. By 1944, 3/4 of all synthetic rubber produced in the United States came from those same plant-based ethanol operations. In 1945, the government shut every one of those plants down. Someone made that decision, and they made sure you would never be taught why. This is the story of the sunflower, not the flower your grandmother grew along the fence for color, an industrial fuel crop that produces more oil per acre than almost anything else on the American continent and has been hiding in plain sight the entire time. Holmes County, Ohio. Autumn. The seed heads are heavy and dry, bowed forward on their stalks the way they go when the oil content is right. A man walks the row pulling them by hand. His father walked this same row. His grandfather pressed oil in this same shed. The wooden workbench has not moved. The press bolted to it has not been replaced in 11 years. He feeds the seeds in from the top. The press moves slow and steady. Oil runs out the bottom spout, clear, golden, faintly warm, and fills the jar underneath without any drama, without any electricity, without any invoice arriving 30 days later from a company headquartered in another state. The solid meal that comes out the other side goes directly into the feed trough. The horses eat it. Their coats show it. Tonight, his equipment will run on the oil he pressed this afternoon from the field he walked this morning. He has never purchased a gallon of diesel fuel in his life. Not because diesel is unavailable, because this press, this field, and this knowledge have been in his family longer than the fuel industry has existed. That chain of knowledge was never broken here, because this community was never inside the system designed to replace it. The engine you call a diesel engine was not designed for petroleum. Rudolf Diesel built it in 1893 to run on vegetable oil. When he demonstrated it at the 1900 Paris World Exhibition running on peanut oil, he was not showing the world a curiosity. He was showing farmers what their fields could do. 8 years later, Henry Ford released the Model T. That car was engineered from day one to run on ethanol or gasoline. The driver chose. Ford did not keep this quiet. He told the New York Times in 1925 that the fuel of the future would come from fruit, weeds, and sawdust, anything that grows. He put his own money behind it. He was not alone. Alexander Graham Bell wrote in National Geographic in 1917 that alcohol was a clean, efficient, and inexhaustible fuel. Inexhaustible as long as farmers could plant a crop. 2 of the most credentialed inventors in American history looked at the same question and arrived at the same answer. Energy grows. By 1937, that answer had become infrastructure. A company called Agrol opened a production plant in Atchison, Kansas. They blended ethanol made from American grain into 2 fuel grades, Agrol 5 and Agrol 10, backed by Henry Ford and the Chemical Foundation. By 1938, Agrol fuel was available at over 2,000 service stations across 8 Midwestern states. The plant in Atchison was producing 18 million gallons of ethanol a year. Farmers were growing their fuel. Drivers were buying it. The system worked. Standard Oil controlled 90% of American oil refining since 1880. When Agrol appeared at 2,000 pumps with a fuel that worked, they did not compete. They destroyed. The tactics are in the congressional record. The National Petroleum Association called ethanol fuel an outrage against common sense. They ran a campaign claiming that ethanol at gas stations would turn every filling pump into a speakeasy, exploiting lingering prohibition fears to associate farm fuel with lawlessness. They pressured legislators in every Midwestern state capital and in Washington simultaneously. Between 1933 and 1939, 19 federal bills and 31 state bills supporting alcohol fuel were killed, every one documented. When legislation failed, they deployed the most effective weapon available to a company with unlimited reserves: price dumping. Agro sold at 17 cents a gallon. Standard Oil dropped leaded gasoline to 16 cents. Not because petroleum cost that little to produce, because Standard Oil could sustain losses for years, and a startup in Kansas could not survive a single season of them. The fuel they used to undercut Agro was leaded gasoline. Lead toxicity had been documented since the early 1920s. Workers at tetraethyl lead refineries were dying. The Surgeon General held hearings on it. Standard Oil continued selling leaded fuel for 50 more years because ethanol came from farms and lead came from refineries they already owned. Agro closed in 1939, not because the fuel failed, not because a single driver rejected it. 3 years later, the United States entered a wartime rubber crisis. The military needed synthetic rubber for everything that kept the war running. The government reopened the exact ethanol plants it had helped destroy. Leo Christensen, the chemist who had designed the Atchison facility, went back to work. By 1944, 3/4 of all American synthetic rubber came from Midwestern corn ethanol. The fuel the petroleum industry had called an outrage against common sense was winning the war. In 1945, they shut those plants down again, every one. Infrastructure dismantled, knowledge shelved, farmers sent back to buying someone else's fuel. Between 1968 and 2000, the General Accounting Office tracked federal energy subsidies. Petroleum received $150 billion. Farm fuel and ethanol received $11 billion. $139 billion difference paid with public money to make petroleum look like the only affordable option, while every alternative was starved of the capital it needed to survive. In July 1977, a senior Exxon scientist named James Black stood before the company's management committee and told them, using their own data, that burning fossil fuels was warming the planet. He projected 2 to 3 degrees of warming. He told them humanity had 5 to 10 years before critical decisions could no longer be deferred. Exxon's internal scientists confirmed his models by 1982. The company spent the next 30 years funding public denial of science its own researchers had verified, documented in hundreds of internal memos published by Inside Climate News and Scientific American. Every time farm fuel worked, it was buried, not because it failed, because it succeeded, and because a farmer pressing oil in a shed does not need a tanker, a pipeline, a refinery, or a quarterly earnings report from anyone. This is what the documented research actually shows about this plant. Sunflower seeds contain 40 to 42% oil by weight. High-performance varieties exceed 45%. Soybeans sit at 18 to 20%, more than double the oil content per seed, not per acre, per seed. 1 acre of oilseed sunflowers under documented field conditions produces between 1,300 and 2,000 pounds of seed. Press those seeds and you recover between 35 and 105 gallons of raw oil per acre. The upper range is not a laboratory projection. It is a field result from a working farmer in western Wisconsin, documented by the Farm Energy Extension Program, which confirmed that sunflower oil yields are consistently superior to soybean for biodiesel, often double or triple per acre. Canola produces between 75 and 240 gallons of oil per acre, depending on variety and conditions. Penn State Extension grew 70 acres of canola on university farmland, ran their own diesel tractors on canola-based fuel, and confirmed that canola biodiesel has a lower cloud point than soy, meaning it stays liquid when temperatures drop below freezing. For every state north of the Mason-Dixon line, that distinction is not academic, it is operational. Cornell University's Small Farms program published a documented report confirming Amish oilseed practices in detail. The pressing, the meal use, the animal feeding, the zero-waste cycle. This is not folklore. It is a published finding from a land-grant university with named researchers and a citation trail. A quarter acre. That is the operational unit. Plant oilseed sunflowers, high oleic varieties bred for oil content, not height, along a fence line, a side lot, the unused strip most properties carry without ever accounting for it. Harvest in early autumn when the heads bow and dry. A manual cold press costs between $60 and $100. It bolts to any workbench. No motor, no electronics, no part that wears out in a normal lifetime. Feed dried seeds in from the top. Oil runs out the bottom into a jar. Solid high-protein meal pushes out the other side into a bucket. Feed for chickens, goats, or compost for the garden bed. 30 minutes per batch. The oil stores sealed for 6 to 12 months in a cool space out of direct light. A quarter acre pressed in October carries a household through winter. Heating fuel for a kerosene unit. Lamp oil through every power outage, lubrication for every small engine and piece of equipment in the garage, and for any diesel engine on the property, a 20 to 30% blend of cold-pressed sunflower oil with standard pump diesel runs without a single engine modification. No conversion kit, no filtration beyond a basic screen. The fuel difference is 3 miles per gallon. The independence difference is total. 5 families on the same road, sharing one pressing afternoon, walk away with enough oil to reduce outside energy dependence through an entire winter season. The Amish do not do this alone. That is part of the system. Rudolf Diesel built an engine that ran on oil pressed from seeds grown in a field. Henry Ford built a car designed to run on grain alcohol. Alexander Graham Bell called farm fuel inexhaustible. By 1938, 2,000 pumps across 8 states proved all 3 of them right. Then $150 billion in public money was spent over 6 decades to make petroleum look like the only option. The engine in your truck was designed to run on what grows in a field. The fuel in your tank was not the inevitable choice. It was the subsidized one. Who decided that? And who has been paying for that decision every time they fill the tank? Today in Holmes County, Ohio, the largest Amish settlement in the world, over 45,000 people, has been pressing oilseeds continuously for generations. Cornell University's Small Farms program documented the practice. The oil feeds the equipment, the meal feeds the horses. Nothing is purchased from outside the cycle. No tanker crossed an ocean. No pipeline runs through this county to keep anyone's tractor running. In North Bennington, Vermont, John Williamson at State Line Farm has been growing oilseed crops, sunflower, canola, flax, mustard, and running diesel equipment on fuel he produces himself since 2004. His biobarn processes 400 gallons per batch. He averages 75 gallons of biodiesel per acre. His tractor has not purchased petroleum diesel in over 20 years. He farms in one of the coldest states in the country. Penn State's farm-scale digesters have been running continuously for decades. The university documented them. The knowledge is published. Suppression did not win completely. It could not reach communities that were never inside the system it was built to protect. Start with the seed. High oleic oilseed sunflower varieties are available through most agricultural suppliers and several online seed companies that specialize in open pollinated crops. Plant in late spring, harvest in early autumn, press immediately or dry and store. The manual cold press is the only equipment required. $60 to $100. One purchase, no recurring cost, no replacement parts in the normal service life of the tool. The Forbidden Fuel, A History of Power Alcohol, published 1983, is still available through university libraries and used booksellers, names every company, every lobby group, and every budget line that constructed the system currently sitting between you and your own fuel supply. It is an academic history, not a pamphlet. Read it as primary source material. Rudolf Diesel pointed at a field and told a farmer, "Your fuel grows there." That has not changed. The field is still there. The press costs less than a tank of diesel, and the seeds still press. They did not bury this because it failed. They buried it because it worked. This investigation is before industry. Every report documents what existed before the system replaced it, who built the replacement, and where the original knowledge still survives today. Stay tuned because the next report covers a building material that was federally defunded in 1937, the same year Agril opened its doors in Atchison, Kansas. When you find out what that material was, what replaced it, and who wrote the legislation that killed it, this video will feel like the introduction. If that matters to you, stay close. This archive is just getting started. Subscribe to support us on this journey.